I knew the week was going to be hell the moment I walked in and saw him. Feet on my desk. My desk. The ergonomic chair I'd picked after 3 back injuries. The monitor I'd calibrated down to the pixel. Even the mug that said world's okayest executive. All of it suddenly belonged to some 26-year-old kid with a trust fund haircut and an ego bigger than the balance sheet. He looked up from his phone, grin wide and lazy, like I'd just interrupted his photo shoot. "You must be Amy," he said. "Pop said you'd be cool with this." Cool with what, exactly? Him parked in my chair like a dollar store king on his throne? And then, like the universe needed me to hate him faster, he raised his phone, angled it just right, and snapped a selfie. Caption already drafted. I saw the words flash across the screen before he hit post. Day 1. Finally took over this place. He tagged the company. He geotagged the office. He blasted it onto Instagram before I could even process the stupidity. That was the moment my stomach didn't drop. It calcified. Because I'd seen this movie before. 16 years in corporate trenches, you get familiar with every species of executive parasite. The empty suit, the buzzword visionary, the cousin shadowing the board. But this one? The CEO's son. Posting selfies in an acquisition window? That wasn't just arrogance. That was a nuclear misstep. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I lose it? Flip the desk? Demand he delete the post before it spread? Because I don't shout, I forward emails. And months ago, while everyone else was drunk on champagne from the Series D announcement, I was the one who stayed up till 3 a.m., reading the fine print of the acquisition packet. Clause 7, page 38. Buried under layers of boilerplate, so boring even legal had skimmed it. But not me. It read, "Any misrepresentation of authority, reputational harm, or breach of confidentiality by an employee or affiliated party may result in immediate contract termination at the buyer's discretion." It was written for this exact scenario, and the CEO's son, barefoot, smug, and already hashtagging his legacy, had just triggered it on record. I didn't even look at him. I walked straight past his sneakers into the copier room, pulled the acquisition binder I'd memorized months ago, and printed Clause 7 on neon highlighted paper. Then I slid it into an envelope with one sticky note on top. Clause 7 triggered. Attached? A screenshot of his post, time-stamped, geotagged, the caption glowing like a confession. I didn't CC the board. I didn't even CC my boss. I BCC'd everyone. And then I sent it straight to legal. By the time he realized I'd left the room, I was already packing a box. Not the dramatic kind. No slamming, no tears. Just my mug, a framed picture of my niece, and a USB loaded with system architecture version histories. "Half day?" HR chirped as I passed with the box in my arms. "Something like that," I said. They didn't know. Not yet. Nobody did. But the thing about systems, especially the ones I design, is they always log who's sitting at the console when the detonation button gets pushed. And him? The new prince of nepotism? He just leaned in so far I didn't need to lift a finger. I walked out like a ghost, silent and already gone. No one chased me. Why would they? The acquisition hadn't even gone public yet. They thought the circus hadn't started. But me? I already knew the clowns were center stage. By the time they figured out what Clause 7 meant, it would be too late. When I left that building, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slammed doors, just me with my banker's box, the same box everyone eventually carries out. But the difference? Mine wasn't full of loss. It was full of receipts. I drove across town to my storage unit, a glorified concrete closet I paid $40 a month for. Inside, filing cabinets nobody knew about. Contracts, patents, side agreements. Every breadcrumb I'd collected since the CEO started whispering about succession planning. See, nepotism doesn't just happen. It brews, quietly, like mold behind wallpaper. You see the signs. The son suddenly hanging around the office, the board pretending not to notice, the CEO casually mentioning future leaders at family barbecues. Most people roll their eyes and move on. But me? I prepare. And that's why, while Chase was busy hashtagging his reign of incompetence, I had already built my exits. Now, here's the thing. People think revenge comes in one big moment. It doesn't. It comes in layers. You plant seeds, you wait, and when the storm hits, you already know which trees will fall. So, I set my banker's box down, pulled open the cabinet, and flipped to the binder labeled "In Case of Dumbassery." Sharpie on the front, underlined twice. Inside, my LLC registration, licensing agreements, and patents linked to my name. Not the company's. Mine. All neat, legal, and signed months ago. By the time I locked the unit and headed home, the first email had already landed in my inbox. Subject: Clause 7 inquiry, urgent from legal. 2 words in the body. Call me. I didn't. Because I knew the chain reaction had already started. Now, I know what you're wondering. Why didn't they just brush it off? Pretend it was a dumb joke? Because acquisitions aren't built on trust. They're built on paranoia. Every comma in those contracts exists because someone once got burned. And Clause 7? That was the nuclear eject button. At 9:43 a.m., while I was brewing tea, a second email came through. This time from procurement. Can you clarify licensing ownership of the analytics module? There it was. The crack in the dam. They'd started looking. Back at headquarters, the mood had shifted. I wasn't there, but I could picture it. The copy machines humming, the HR team eating sheet cake for someone's birthday, while 2 floors up, legal was in a war room with printouts spread like crime scene photos. Someone would have printed Chase's selfie. Someone else would have highlighted the caption in yellow. And then, as silence fell, someone would have read Clause 7 out loud. I knew exactly how it went because I'd sat in those rooms before. First comes denial. Maybe it doesn't count. Maybe it's not binding. Then bargaining. He's not technically an employee. He didn't log into the system. And finally, the cold realization. Perception matters more than intent. And perception had already gone viral. But me? I stayed calm. I watered the plants, answered a text from my sister about dinner next week. Because while they were panicking, I was waiting. And waiting is an art form. By noon, the buyer had gone quiet. That's how you know it's bad. Silence. No cheerful Slack pings, no looking forward to onboarding emails. Just the kind of dead air that makes directors sweat through their suits. I heard from a friend in compliance that by lunchtime, people were whispering in the hallways. Did you see what Chase posted? Is the deal dead? Of course, it wasn't dead yet, but it was bleeding out. And while they scrambled to stop the hemorrhage, I did something incredibly ordinary. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my folder labeled Merger Watch. Inside, every contract redline, every NDA, every time-stamped update, my safety net, my leverage, my story, written in signatures and clauses no one else bothered to read. Because here's the truth. Corporations don't fall because of dramatic speeches or one bad Instagram post. They fall because the people holding them together quietly decide to let go. And I had just let go. By the next morning, the silence wasn't just noticeable. It was suffocating. Normally, when a merger is about to close, you hear it in the building before you see it. Constant emails, onboarding packets, conference calls that bleed past midnight. But now? My phone stayed quiet. No updates, no cheerful reminders. Just a single notification from LinkedIn. Someone had viewed my profile from an IP address in New York. Buyer side. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't calling my boss. They were looking at me. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, the walls were closing in. A friend from finance and someone I trusted texted me around 9:15. They printed the selfie. It's on the table in the 14th floor war room. Clause 7 highlighted I could see it without being there. Directors sitting stiff, coffee going cold, no one daring to say out loud what the paper already screamed. First came the excuses. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe the buyer won't notice. But buyers notice everything. That's why Clause 7 existed in the first place. It wasn't ornamental. It was a trapdoor, and Chase had just stomped on it with both feet. At 9:47, my friend sent another text. Buyer counsel emailed. 3 questions. Who is Chase? What is his role? Does he speak for the company? 3 questions that should have been easy. Except there were no answers that didn't sound like negligence. Now, I know what you're thinking. Couldn't Martin, the CEO, the proud father, just wave it away? Say his son was shadowing, harmless, not part of the org chart? He tried. I heard later he wrote back, an unfortunate attempt at humor. No formal authority, but perception doesn't care about intent. And perception had already been screenshot, time-stamped, and passed around faster than office gossip at happy hour. Meanwhile, I stayed home, made another pot of jasmine tea, cleaned my kitchen, and kept my laptop open on the counter. Emails trickled in. Procurement again. Please clarify licensing ownership. Legal. Need confirmation on middleware rights. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because the truth was, they already knew the answer. They were just hoping I'd make it easier by handing them a loophole. Noon. That's when the buyer froze everything. Calls canceled. Shared Slack channel archived. Meeting invites disappeared mid-refresh. For anyone who's been through a merger, you know what that means. Death by silence. Inside the building, panic set in. Directors started forwarding Chase's post up the chain. Is this real? Why didn't we know about this? Where's Amy? And that last question, where's Amy, was the one they should have asked months ago. Because I was the backbone of the system, and they'd let me walk out without a sound. By 12:37, my friend texted again. Board demanding list of every system you touched. They're realizing they can't answer buyer questions without you. That was the crack widening into a canyon. Because the truth was simple. I hadn't just touched the systems. I was the systems. The architecture, the analytics, the vendor stack. All of it tied back to code I'd written, contracts I'd structured, licenses I controlled. But they hadn't noticed. Until now. At 1:15, another text. Board call at 4. They're not smiling. I leaned back in my chair, tea cooling in my hand, and let it wash over me. Because this wasn't rage. This wasn't panic. This was inevitability. The avalanche had started, and I wasn't under it. I was watching from a distance, safe, prepared, and very much in control. And the best part? They still thought they could contain it. By the time the clock struck 4, the boardroom might as well have been a bunker. 7 directors dialed in from across the country, cameras off, voices sharp. In the middle sat Martin Vance, CEO, father, and now unwilling chaperone of the mess his son had created. The infamous selfie was printed in triplicate on the table, Clause 7 highlighted in yellow like a warning flare. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. Friends inside fed me pieces afterward, and the story was always the same. The meeting was less strategy, more autopsy. Let's begin, Martin had said, trying for calm. We're not beginning anything, snapped Gloria Tran, head of risk oversight. We're cleaning up. The first item, Chase. His name was already poison. Within minutes, the board voted unanimously to ban him from all company premises, systems, and communications. No hesitation, not even from Martin. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Less than 36 hours ago, Chase had been playing CEO from my chair. Now he didn't even have a badge. The second item was Martin himself. Mr. Vance, Gloria continued, voice flat as stone. Based on the material breach initiated under your leadership, we are recommending administrative leave effective immediately. Pending investigation, Martin tried to fight. Respectfully, I believe I'm being scapegoated. Cynthia Shaw, meticulous and unflinching, didn't even look up from her notes. You gave your unvetted son access to an executive office during an active acquisition. That's not scapegoating. That's negligence. They called a vote, 7 hands raised. Martin didn't raise his. By 4:09, he was out. And then came the question that mattered most. Where's Amy? Silence fell. Because that was the heart of the implosion. The buyer didn't care about Martin's ego. They cared about systems, contracts, ownership, all of which traced back to me. Procurement had already dug up my filings. DM Strategic Systems, LLC, my name on licenses, my signature on middleware agreements. The reality was unavoidable. The architecture didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. Martin had tried to bury that months ago, instructing ops to sanitize my documents before submission. But mergers are paperwork mountains, and somewhere along the line, someone missed a page. Page 14 of the appendix, plain as day. All middleware components supporting operational analytics and vendor harmonization shall be licensed through DM Strategic Systems, LLC, with exclusive rights for deployment, adaptation, and modification. There it was. Ordinary words, dull legal phrasing. But to the board, it was a landmine. Because the buyer had this version, they'd built their integration map on it, and now it was binding. One director muttered, "We can amend it, issue a revised plan." "You're not listening," Gloria cut in. "The buyer already has this plan. It's foundation. You can't rewrite history." Cynthia leaned forward. "And even if you could, Donna," she corrected herself, then said my name with deliberate precision. "Amy is the one with control, not us." That was the moment the truth settled. The company wasn't just bleeding a deal. They'd handed me the scalpel. After Martin's removal, the lawyers flipped through the binder, sweat spotting the pages. "Technically," one paralegal said, "we don't own the middleware layer." "We license it," Martin, still sitting pale and silent, tried one last defense. "Then cancel the license." But even that had been covered. The survivability clause. My survivability clause. It stated that even if the merger collapsed, license terms remained enforceable. Revocation required mutual consent. Mine. At that point, the room went quiet. Not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind, when everyone knows the game is over, but no one wants to be the first to say it. Finally, Harold Kessler, oldest and meanest of the directors, broke the silence. "We need to contact Amy." And just like that, the woman they'd ignored, dismissed, and quietly replaced with the CEO's son became the only name that mattered. By the time I got their message that evening, polite, careful, almost begging, I didn't even have to smile, because I'd already won. The message from the board landed in my inbox at 8:12 p.m. Subject: request for clarification and re-engagement. The tone was formal, clinical, but underneath it was desperation. They wanted me back, not as an employee, not as staff. They wanted me to save them. I read it twice, then a third time. They asked for a confidential session regarding systems integration and associated IP rights. They understood my expertise was critical to mitigating damage. In other words, the deal was slipping through their fingers, and I was the only one with a rope. I set my laptop aside, poured myself a cup of jasmine tea, and let them wait. By morning, the buyer's rep had joined the chorus. His email was shorter, sharper. "Would you be willing to license your system independently, directly through your LLC?" That was it. No pleasantries, just business. And right there, in black and white, was the moment I'd been waiting for. The merger, the panic, the humiliation. All of it funneled down to a single sentence. They no longer owned me. I owned the system. And if they wanted it, they'd come to me. At 10 a.m., the video call began. On one side, the board. Faces stiff, clothes too polished, each of them sitting a little straighter than usual. On the other side, the buyer's representative. Calm, precise, and clearly here to decide if anything could still be salvaged. And then me. No boardroom, no corner office. Just my webcam, angled slightly off-center with my mug beside me. "Thank you for joining, Ms. Moore," the buyer's rep said. "We'll be direct. Luxec still wants the system. We believe in its integrity despite recent complications." He paused. "Would you license it to us independently?" I didn't flinch, didn't smile, just said, "Yes." The board exhaled, relief flooding their faces. Too soon. "Triple the original rate," I added. The silence that followed was almost comical. Someone on the board unmuted, about to argue, but the buyer's rep raised a hand. He wasn't surprised. He expected it. "And one more thing," I said. "I want a seat on the board. Full voting rights, or no deal." The air froze. You could almost hear the directors choking on their pride. But pride doesn't pay for acquisitions, and survival was all they had left. Finally, Harold Kessler muttered, "Motion to approve." "Seconded," Gloria said, eyes steady. "Confirmed," Cynthia added, her voice clipped. No one objected. Not now. Not after everything. The buyer's rep nodded once. "Then we're aligned." I didn't thank them, didn't smirk. I simply clicked leave meeting. That was all. By the afternoon, Martin's termination had been finalized. The press release said he was pursuing new opportunities. Internally, everyone knew the truth. His son had pulled the pin, and I had walked away holding the detonator. As for me, I didn't return as an employee. I didn't want the catered lunches or the parking space or the office with a view. I wanted ownership, control, the thing they had taken for granted until it was too late. And now, I had it. That evening, I sat on my porch, storm clouds rolling over the fields, tea cooling in my hand. My inbox buzzed, requests from firms that had once passed me over for flashier names. Subject lines like, urgent, integration help needed, confidential consultation inquiry. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because here's the truth. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. Quiet. Patient. Until the moment everyone realizes they can't move without you. And that's the message I want you to take from this. You don't have to be the loudest in the room to win. You don't need to slam doors or scream for credit. Sometimes the most devastating power move is forwarding one email and letting the system collapse under its own arrogance. So to anyone out there who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, remember Clause 7. Remember that leverage doesn't come from noise. It comes from preparation, from patience, from knowing exactly when to let go. And when that day comes, when the people who ignored you suddenly realize they need you, you'll have a choice. Do you save them? Or do you finally choose yourself? Me? I chose myself. And I never looked back.